So when I saw that, I thought, well, that's pretty interesting visually. So that's how that became incorporated into the film. But yeah, it was just serendipitous, really.
And from a young age, you had contacts with some rather large film celebrities. Do you want to talk about some of your connections with some of the Hammer crew?
Well, my first connection was when I was 10. I loved Boris Karloff. So I wrote this letter to Boris Karloff asking him to be my pen pal. And a nice note like saying, well, I'm very busy, I can't be your pen pal. When I went to Hammer Films, Paul Jensen, who plays the blind guy in here, who is an exceptional film historian, critic, actually, and maybe you've read some of his books. He had interviewed Freddie Francis for Variety magazine, so he had his address, which was 58 Wheatlands, Heston Village, Middlesex. So I think I was a sophomore in college. I just went over there and knocked on his door, and he wasn't there. So I went to sleep in the front yard, and these people came by and said, "Are you here to see Freddie?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Have you come from far away?" And I said, "Well, yeah, New York City." And they go, "Well, he's in California directing a horror film." So, but turned out he wasn't. These other neighbors knew him, and he was in Bournemouth or someplace. And so I wound up staying with Freddie for like a month, and that's how I met, my childhood heroes, really, Peter Cushing mainly, and Christopher.
And what film sets did you get on around that time?
Terrible title, Scars of Dracula, with Christopher Lee, and The Creeping Flesh, another not so good title, with Peter Cushing. But that was fun though for me, because they were like, like most kids grow up liking Mickey Mantle. I liked Peter Cushing.
Some other famous names. What about, who helped you with the dubbing? Who helped set up the dubbing for Last House on Dead End Street?
Francis Ford Coppola. This is a funny story. Francis Ford Coppola was in town. He was going to appear at the YMHA on 96th Street in Manhattan. So I figured, well, if Coppola's in town, he's going to be staying at a nice hotel. He's not going to be at the Greenwich. So I called the St. Moritz, which was the first hotel, and I get Francis Ford Coppola's room. And so some guy answers the phone and said, "Yes, Mr. Coppola there?" And the guy goes, "Hey, Francis, somebody wants to talk to you." And I hear this, "Tell him my ass is on fire, man. I'm shitting my brains out. Call back in 10 minutes. So I called him back, and he was going, "I had all these hot peppers and shit. I'm just dying." So he said, "Listen, I'm going to be at the 96th Street Y tonight. Why don't you come by?" And I did. And he was very nice. He goes, "Look, I know this place in Princeton, New Jersey. This is the original dubbing, not this mess you've seen." And he set that whole thing up for me, and it was nice. That was nice.
Let's talk about some of the versions of this movie. There's a lot of erroneous information out there, as some of us may be aware, or others of us may not be. Well, how long was your original cut of the movie? Your raw cut?
2 hours and 55 minutes. Very self-indulgent and pretentious.
And then at some point you edited it down to a feature, correct?
About 2 hours, yeah.
About 2 hours.
Yep. And that was dubbed. Did you go to that dubbing?
No.
First
time ever. I was someplace else.
I
was up in the vineyards of the Finger Lakes.
Okay.
Was the actor imitating him, doing the voice? It sounds a bit like it.
Oh no, this is a third dubbing. I'm trying to think, who did you? I have no idea. He did good though. He did good. Yeah. I don't know who it was. Anyway, so there's these three different versions of the film. I'm appalled by. I love what Barrel's done with the DVD and the quality and what they had available, but I must tell you, I just cringe. I came in here earlier to watch this thing. I lasted 10 minutes. I had to leave because just the whole thing existed in linear time, straight linear time. The first 20 minutes of the film was in the slaughterhouse, and you cut from Ken working in the slaughterhouse to me working in a porno theater, to the women leaving their husbands, to Bill just being a madman filmmaker, So the first shot you see of me walking up to that building was probably 25 minutes into the picture. So I have a hard time watching this film, really. The last half hour is the murders are pretty much as they were, except something I liked very much. The guy who sucks the deer hoof.
That's the way we all look.
What happens is he leaves and he runs past every murder scene. So he sees the bodies, he sees this, and the other. He keeps running and running and running. And he winds up going through a door into his own home, which I thought was interesting. I stole it from Stanley Kubrick's 2001. You know, the guy goes through infinity, winds up in a bedroom, which I thought was great. So, okay, he goes through all this shit, and he winds up in his own house. So the audience is disoriented. The character is disoriented. Everything's very strange. And then, of course, these people come in and kill him. But that's missing. That's about the only thing in the last half hour that's missing, I think. But I like that very much.
Does anyone want to jump in with some specific questions?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly get the impression from even watching this re-edited version that's come out that the film is very much, as much or more so an art film than it is an exploitation film.
Well, thank you.
Was that the intention?
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Would you like to elaborate?
Would you suggest that the original cuts of it would be much more so along those lines?
Yeah. Yep. Thank you very much. Yes.
Two-part question. I understand. My understanding is that you had no work in the re-editing of this, and if that's correct, why would somebody kind of?
Nobody ever re-edited. What they did was, I edited the film. This is ridiculous. It was such a low-budget film. I edited the film on rewinds clamped to a table. I never had 24. I never had 24 frames per second. I had that's about right, exactly. So what happened was when these distributors got a hold of it, they would just take like these flash forwards. This is an insult to you as an audience. It's like, well, we have to have some blood here because maybe the audience is stupid. You know, it just offends me. It just absolutely offends me.
In the version we see that the soundtrack at the end, the music part of it, is that your original soundtrack or is that something that was put on afterwards?
The music?
Yeah.
No, that music came from a cutting house in called Ross Gaffney on 46th Street in New York City.
So is it stock music or do you know who?
Stock music. A guy named Jim Flamberg and I distorted it. Jim Flamberg is an interesting man, good friend of mine. He wrote a film called Nurse Betty, which was out 2 years ago. I think it got best screenplay at Cannes Film Festival. Yeah.
What would you like to tell the audience about your original score? You had an original score composed for the film which you didn't use.
You remember that? It was a piece of shit. It was a college professor who wanted to write the original score. You heard it, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
It was a movie score, correct?
No. It was sounded like somebody blowing through a douchebag.
What does that sound like?
It was just awful. It was just awful. So we threw